Welcome to Emotionally Healthy Legacy. My name is Elizabeth, and I am a mom of 4. I have 3 boys and 1 little girl. My goal here is to educate moms about emotional wellness and motherhood, learning how to regulate their own emotions in a healthy way, and then teaching their little ones regulating their emotions and how to build close relationships in families. Hi, mamas. Welcome back. Today I want to talk about emotions and sin. And if you are a believer, then this is something you might be struggling with, because I have been teaching a lot about emotions lately, but honestly, I had this kind of like light bulb go up in my head that just kind of went off the other day when I was planning a talk for a women's retreat. And when we are emotional and we act on those emotions, and I'm talking about negative emotions here, we often make sinful choices. So this is what we're going to talk about today, and kind of like what the Bible says and kind of what we can do. And it's kind of an overall surface scraping of what I do teach. So if this is something that is interesting for you, then follow along. I have a couple questions to ask you. Start out with, have you ever said or done things in anger that were sinful? Do you feel like negative feelings control you? A lot of sinful actions happen because someone was not able to manage their big negative emotions. We're talking about frustration, anger, bitterness, resentful. Those are big feelings. And people, if you don't manage them, if you don't know how to regulate them, they might lead to sin. You might say hurtful things. You might do hurtful things. You might do some destructive things. And what I mean by that is, like, you will do destructive things to an environment or to your home. People sometimes in anger will break things. Maybe you're even in a relationship where that happens. So hurtful things may be done to themselves or another. And sometimes we want to physically hurt someone when we're angry. Sometimes we do something hurtful to ourselves. So sinful actions can happen and will happen if we don't manage our big emotions. Here's some verses to think about. Galatians 5:22-23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. So it doesn't talk about other control, it talks about self-control. Everyone should be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to become angry. James 1:19. How though? How can we become slow to be angry? We'll talk about this a little bit later on. Fools give full vent to their rage, but the wise bring calm in the end. Proverbs 29:11. A soft word turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Proverbs 15:1, which tells us we need to say a soft word, which, if you know, when someone is really dysregulated, soft words don't come out. So it is our job to learn how to regulate our emotions so we are in our thinking brain, so we can say positive things. A hot-tempered person stirs up conflict, but the one who is patient calms a quarrel. Proverbs 15:18. So if we're patient, we can calm a conflict if we are patient and we are soft with our words. So here's a question to think about. If someone could look into your home and see how you handle your frustration and anger, what would they see? I want you to kind of sit with that question. Maybe even journal about it today. What would someone see if they looked into your home and saw how you handled frustration and anger? Is this what you want to teach your children? To handle their frustration and anger in such ways, or not? Is this the example you want to set for them? And I'm not saying this to shame you. I'm just saying this to kind of bring awareness, and maybe this is an area that needs to be worked on. We need to understand what happens in our brain when we get emotional. And I've taught about this before on the podcast, and I will go over it again today, because if you haven't listened to the previous episodes, in either way, it's a really good review. So we were created by God, for our brain to have like three main parts when it comes to emotions and behavior. We have our frontal lobe, which is prefrontal cortex. It's right behind your forehead. And just for the sake of making things simple, I call it the thinking brain. A little bit below that, kind of right in the middle of our brain, we have our feeling brain. And then on the bottom, where we have our brain stem connected to our spinal cord, we have our survival part of the brain. And we'll go into depth a little bit talking about what's going on when we are in that part of the brain. It's when it's activated. So our thinking brain is kind of what's going on right now. More than likely, you are thinking and learning something new as I'm teaching this to you. It is our part of the brain that is logical. We're able to problem solve when that part of the brain is activated. We can make positive choices that are respectful and kind, and because that part of our brain acts on our values. It does not fully develop until our mid-20s, because that's why you'll see teenagers and kids are so immature, because this part of the brain is not fully developed until they are in their mid-20s. It also shuts off when we experience strong emotions. So when we're feeling frustrated, irritated, annoyed, overwhelmed, super stressed, it will shut off this part of the brain that helps us make positive choices. So that is a really, really important thing to remember and to keep in mind. If you hear noise, that's because my baby's right next to me and she's just been talking. Behind that, underneath our prefrontal cortex, we have our feeling brain. This is where we experience our big emotions. This part of the brain tends to act on our emotions, and it comes out in our behavior. So if we are experiencing overwhelm, stress, we're extremely annoyed, irritated, triggered, frustrated, it will come out in disrespectful words, hurtful words. It will come out in attitude or being rude or negative. This part of the brain only sees our perspective. So if we are in this feeling part of the brain, if we're triggered by some reason or another, we're stressed, overwhelmed, we shift to this part of the brain and we will make a negative, let's say, remark. We'll have some attitude or we'll say something disrespectful, and our brain will see how we are right and the other person is wrong. It will only see our perspective, that we can justify being disrespectful because we are right. So this part of the brain kind of shuts off the thinking brain, and it's so hard to make positive choices when we are in this position, when we are shifted here. It often makes negative choices with added stress. So you might be a little bit frustrated, and you can, depending how frustrated you are, you might still be able to make some positive choices. But if enough stress is added, you will definitely shift to emotional part of the brain and even survival part of the brain. And those parts do not make positive choices. The survival part of the brain is where the brainstem is. It's like all the way in the back, right? By the spinal cord over there. This is fully developed when we are born, and this is our automatic part of the brain. We do not do any thinking when we are there. You cannot learn anything, no skills, nothing. It just shuts everything off. It is super impulsive. That's why this is fully developed when kids are born, and you will notice that kids are very, very impulsive because this is the part of the brain that is fully developed, and they quickly shift into survival part of the brain. What happens is this part of the brain is fight, flight, or freeze, which means you're either going to fight the situation. If, let's say, someone takes their toy and they will physically hurt the other person, it's automatic. They don't even have to think about it. It's impulse. And oftentimes we punish them for being impulsive. It would be flight, like the situation's so overwhelming or stressful, you just want to run away. It's like you running away from a bear. Or freeze, you're just frozen and like your brain is just stuck. You don't know what to do. So this is this part of the brain. It also, because it has the fight, flight, or freeze, it will become physically aggressive. So when you are in this part of the brain, and if there's enough stress and it's long enough and prolonged enough, you might shift to where you want to become physically aggressive, wanting to hurt the other person because you're so angry or you're feeling out of control. I notice this happens with me with my children. When I say something and they're not listening, and I say it again and they're not listening, after a little bit, I get really frustrated. And then after that, the frustration builds up and I want to become physically hurtful to them. And that is wrong. I know that, and I need to learn to regulate myself. And I'm working through that. I have way less of those moments than I used to. Yet, that's why it happens, because it is that part of the brain that gets activated. When our brain is under stress, it will shift to the emotional part of the brain. With prolonged stress, it will shift to survival part of the brain, which is automatic and unable to make positive choices. Why do we even get emotional to begin with? Have you ever thought about that? Like, why do we even shift to emotional part of the brain? So here's a few things. I talk about this a lot, especially on my Instagram page. It's unmet basic needs. So if we're sleep deprived, if we have not been eating meals, that is a basic need that our brain needs to function. And if those needs are not met, it becomes a threat in our body, and it will shift us to emotional part of the brain. So if we're already in the emotional part of the brain, and then there's something more stress added to it, we can quickly shift to survival part of the brain. Or we'll get even more emotional. Unmet emotional needs, not feeling heard, not feeling understood, not feeling valued. Those are kind of things that happen oftentimes in our marriages or relationships where you don't feel heard or understood by your spouse. And you will notice that that is really triggering and frustrating, and that will shift you to emotional part of the brain. Or feeling out of control. Things are not going our way the way we want them to. That shifts us also into emotional part of the brain, and we will tend to be more in reactive mode. I apologize for the baby noises. It is what it is. It's motherhood, right? And most of you that are listening are probably moms, so you know what it's like. All right, the next one is hormones. Our female hormones, our cycle, will affect how emotional we are. And the more stress we have in our life, and the more unmanaged, unregulated stress that we have not learned to release in a healthy way, the more our hormones will go out of whack. So that is another thing to keep in mind. Our hormones are affected by the amount of stress we have in our lives. And the next one is prolonged and unmanaged stress. Well, it will affect our hormones. And that's why it's so important to learn how to manage stress in a healthy way. How to reduce it, first of all. How to release it. What things we can do on a proactive basis to be less stressed out. How to calm our nervous system down. Also, another thing that can really affect how emotional we are, how triggered easily we are, is if we're going through grief. That is huge. If you're going through any sort of loss in your life, it could be a loss of a pet, a loss of a parent, a friend, a loss of a child, or a miscarriage, or a loss of finances, whatever it might be, or like a life that you thought you had, or a loss of a marriage that you had, and it turns out that it was super destructive and it's not what you thought it was. Those things will bring out grief. And when you are grieving, you are a lot more emotional and you're a lot more easily triggered. That is another thing to kind of keep in mind, and also give yourself grace when you are going through the grieving process. And that's why it's really important to learn how to process emotions in a healthy way and get professional help, so then when you are able to grieve and move through it in a healthy way and not get stuck. Because if you're going through grief, it's going to affect your emotional wellness and it's going to spill out into the rest of the home. Also, one other thing that I noticed that definitely affects me is too much stimulation. So if there's a lot happening around me, the kids are loud and I'm making dinner and I get a phone call and the baby's crying and I dropped some water and I spilled some, there's just so much happening at the same time, my brain gets overstimulated and I definitely get more emotional, easily triggered, much more frustrated. So that is something I know about myself, so I need to kind of be more aware of it and reduce stimulation. So if my kids are watching cartoons, sometimes I'll send them upstairs so there's less noise, so I'm less stimulated, so I'm not as easily frustrated.
If you're a mom that struggles with handling her challenging emotions in a healthy way, listen up. I got a tool for you. If you go in the show notes of this podcast, you will see a link where you can sign up for a 5-day free mini course. And in that mini course, you get to learn actual practical things that you can do in the moment and outside of the moment to be more patient and calm so you're not as overwhelmed, so you're not as stressed, and actual ways to learn to de-stress yourself and calm your nervous system down. How often do we hear that we shouldn't react, we should respond? And the problem is, well, how? In the moment, I don't know how because I'm so overwhelmed and so triggered. In this mini course, you get to learn the how. I am so excited that I have these skills that I can share with you. So go in the show notes, click on the link, enter your email, and then you can start the 5-day free mini course.
The next thing I want to kind of focus on is we'll talk about mainly frustration. And why I want to talk about frustration is because if frustration is not managed, it will lead to anger. So we have to, frustration is kind of like you're kind of getting annoyed, irritated, frustration builds up, and we need to catch that and start regulating in those moments, because if we don't, that's when it will turn into anger. And that's when, and anger is when we start making sinful choices. When we have a plan how to handle our frustration, we are able to access it in the moment. If I just tell you, stop being frustrated, that's not helpful. If I tell you, well, you have to manage frustration, if you don't know how and you don't have a plan how to do it, you can't really expect any change or any breakthrough. You have to learn how to do it, and you also have to come up with a plan that works for you. Another thing that before we move forward about how to managing frustration, as a Christian, a lot of times we need to kind of consider what things are our responsibility and what things are God's responsibility. Sometimes we put on a lot of responsibility on God and not take enough responsibility on what things we are responsible for. So God's responsibility, like when you pray and you ask God for patience, you're asking God for wisdom. That is that only God can give that to you. Yet, there are things that you need to do that is your part, your responsibility to support yourself. For example, if you're praying, God, please send me a job. I need a new job. That is God's part to provide an opportunity. Your job is to go fill out applications and do actions, do actionable steps. If you are praying, Lord, I want to have a better, closer relationship with you. Please give me the desire to read the Bible. That is great, and God will give that to you, but your job is to actually sit down and read the Bible. Your job is to actually get in the Word and pray and surround yourself with people. That's not God's job. That is your responsibility. And God calls us, He says, draw near to me and I will draw near to you. So you have to take some action steps. Now, if we want to be more emotionally regulated, to be more kind of patient and calm to begin with, there are certain action steps that only we can take. That is not God's responsibility. That is our responsibility. God tells us we need to rest. It's our responsibility to get the sleep. God tells us to take some time to reconnect with God. So it's our responsibility to take action and do that. So let's focus on some things that it is our responsibility. For example, prioritizing your basic needs, getting enough sleep, and eating. If you are sleep deprived or if you are hungry, add some extra stress in the mix. It's a recipe for disaster. You will lose it if there's enough stress buildup. It's just going to happen. So that's why it's so important to prioritize sleep and eating meals. Like God designed us that way for it to be a basic need. When our basic needs are not met, our brain goes into threat mode, shifts us to emotional part of the brain. Add extra stress to that, screaming kids, running late, shifts you to survival part of the brain. This is also our responsibility, is to reduce the amount of commitments that we have on a regular basis, because the more we have, the more stress it creates. And that more stress we are under, we're easily shifted into emotional and survival part of the brain, and that's when we make negative choices. So it is up to us to reduce the commitments that we have. If there's something in your life that is stressing you out, that is overwhelming you, that is not serving you, maybe it did a year ago, but not anymore, it's something to reconsider and cut out of your life, and saying no to certain commitments. Creating white space in your day where you are still. This is like connecting with God. This is where you can pray, where you can read the Bible, where you can breathe. Just being still and grounded. That will in itself calm your nervous system down and you will be more calm throughout the day. That's just the way it works. Also, doing something that fills up your cup on a regular basis. That is something I am doing, and I continue have to do something that doesn't involve my kids, something that's just for me, something that I really enjoy. Going out with a friend, getting together, taking a bath, reading a book, doing exercise, something that is just specifically for you, like doing a puzzle, doing a coloring book. Something that releases your stress, something that you enjoy, maybe something that's creative, maybe just listening to music, maybe having a favorite drink and just watching a show, something that does not involve your children, something for yourself that you do on a regular basis that will help you be less resentful and better towards your family that they all take, and you'll find yourself to be more grounded and less in reactive mode. Here's a quote that I really, really like. I heard a long time ago and I stand by it. Sometimes it is not a spiritual problem. Sometimes you just need some sleep, mama. Really? Sometimes that's all you need. Here are some things that you can handle frustration in the moment. So you start, let's say you're making dinner. Things are getting a little bit overwhelming. I had this with me the other day. The baby's crying. My trying to do homework with my 6-year-old. My 4-year-old is in the living room making lots of noise. My 9-year-old is complaining about something. So there's lots of stimulation. It's getting overwhelming. It's a lot happening. So here's how you can kind of handle it in the moment. Here are a few tips. You take or leave it. Maybe some things that will help to you, but just kind of maybe pick out one or two that will be super helpful for you. So saying a prayer for patience, I do this. I'm like, Lord, please give me the patience. I feel overwhelmed and stressed. I need your support. I need your help. Inviting God to be there with you in that moment. Also, if things are safe, and I didn't do it the other day, but I do that sometimes when I start feeling like things are getting really tense and I'm about to lose it. Instead of losing it, recognizing that you're headed there and taking a break and communicating it with the family if needed. If it's around your kids, you can say, hey, mom is feeling really frustrated. I need some alone time. I need 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Like, don't talk to me. Give me a break. And I'll tell that to my kids. Don't ask me questions right now. I'm really overwhelmed. I cannot think or answer. Like, give me some space. And that's like a boundary that you can set. And it's better to walk away than to blow up on your family. When I walk away, this is what you can do. Or you can also do it in the moment as things are feeling frustrated, but you can't walk away and you have to deal with whatever is happening, taking slow, deep breaths. I do this all the time. Also, saying affirmations to yourself. I feel frustrated. This is hard, and with God's help, I can handle this. I've got this. I can handle this. That message, when you say that to yourself, it sends a safety signal to your brain, and your thinking brain can turn back on. If you are just telling yourself, like, I can't do this, then you're gonna act on that. Also, another thing that I do sometimes I do it in the moment. If I can't leave, or even if I can leave, I do this. I visualize myself in a calm, peaceful environment that is stress reducing for me, and I visualize myself being there, and that calms my body down. Sometimes I sing a song or listen to music. Too much stimulation, I can't turn music on, but if I'm rocking a baby who's fussy and she's not falling asleep, I will sing. Oh, here she goes. I will sing a calming song that calms my body down, and that also helps her calm her body down. So those are some like practical things that you can do in the moment to help you with that. I want you to take a moment right now. I don't know what you're doing. If you're driving, obviously you can. But I would encourage you to pause for a minute, and I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to take some deep breaths. As you take the deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth, I want you to relax your shoulders with each exhale. I want you to visualize yourself at a beach. It's a white beach with white sand that is super, super soft. There's a hammock in the palm trees, a white hammock that you get to lay on. You feel a slight breeze in the air. It is calm and peaceful. There's beautiful white clouds and a blue sky. The water is turquoise and is absolutely gorgeous. And there are some beautiful mountains in the background. And you are just being still. You're enjoying the calmness and peace. How does your body feel? How does your brain feel? Your nervous system, it's calm and peaceful. That's what I want you to visualize when you walk away from a frustrating situation. Now, I want you to kind of remember before we leave is that when we are changing automatic patterns of reacting, it will take some practice. So if your automatic pattern is to get frustrated and to raise your voice and lose it, to switch to breathing and calming your nervous system down with visualization will take some practice. It doesn't happen overnight, but the more we practice, the better we get at it. If we have a plan, this is what I'm going to do next time I feel frustrated with my kids. I will take some deep breaths and visualize myself at a beach in a safe place, a calm environment. First of all, you will be a lot more calm, you will lose less, but in order for that to become your new automatic pattern under stress, you have to practice it intentionally 500 to 1,000 times. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's like learning a new language. It just doesn't happen overnight. Before we go, I want you to kind of keep in mind like what happens when we ignore our uncomfortable feelings. So it will spill out negatively into our behavior if we just ignore our feelings and don't do anything about them. And we will tend to take sinful actions when we are in the emotional part of the brain. It will negatively affect our relationships. So when we take sinful actions and we say and do hurtful things, it will affect the relationships with our family members in a negative way. It will create unhealthy patterns of coping. So if we don't calm our nervous system down, we will turn to unhealthy coping skills, which could be like sugar or being on our phone or maybe even alcohol or drugs, because life is so uncomfortable and feelings are so uncomfortable. We will also miss out on opportunities with emotional connection with people that are close in our lives. So if we communicate with our loved ones that we are struggling and why we are struggling with those feelings, it creates emotional connection between us, especially, let's say, with your spouse. Also, like if we ignore the stress buildup in our bodies, it will negatively affect our health eventually. So that is also something to keep in mind. It's so important to be able to regulate your emotions, negative emotions, well, because if we don't, it builds up the stress in our bodies and it will affect our health in a negative way eventually. One thing that I want you to remember is that we cannot control what emotion comes, but we can control our thoughts and what we do with that emotion that does show up. So we can't control if anger is going to come, like if we get triggered or whatever, but we can control our environment and also in the sense of kind of what we do and how we direct some of our thoughts. Because if we see that our child is melting down and our thought is, he's giving me a hard time, he's being, a pain in the butt, he's making it really hard for me, we're going to start feeling even more frustration. But if we can control our thoughts and direct them, like he's having a hard time because he doesn't know how to handle his emotions in a healthy way, that's going to reduce the frustration. So we can kind of manage the emotions, but we can't control which emotion shows up. And having emotions and negative emotions is not sinful. It becomes sinful what we do with them. I've said this before and I will say it again. How we think affects how we feel. How we feel affects how we behave and the choices we make. How we behave will affect the relationships and the people around us. Here's a few tips how to communicate your emotions. I apologize. Yes, there's a baby next to me who likes to make lots of noise. So here's the few tips that for communicating emotions. So we kind of need to say what we feel, because when we try to express and label what we feel, that uses our thinking brain and kind of forces it to turn back on. So you can tell, let's say your spouse or your children that are around you, let's say you're at home and things are getting tense and you're getting overwhelmed and frustrated, you can say to your husband or to your children, say, I feel overwhelmed and frustrated. And then you say, I need blank. I need some space and time to calm down. So please don't talk to me, or I need some space to calm down so I don't say or do anything hurtful. I'm going to go to my room and I'm going to be there for 10 minutes. Or say, I need your help with the children, take them outside. You say what you feel and what you need from your spouse or your children. Obviously, if your kids are super little, oh, Nelly, she's spitting up as I'm talking. She's spitting all over me, and sorry. Okay. Or you can say, I feel blank because blank, and I would appreciate if blank. So I feel overwhelmed because I have a lot going on at the same time, and I would appreciate if you help me make dinner, or I would appreciate if you take the kids outside so they are not making things challenging for me right now, or whatever it might be. So I feel blank because blank. I would appreciate blank if you help me with this. That's kind of expressing what you feel and expressing your needs. And you're also giving an opportunity for your family to kind of support you where you're at. Because if we keep building up that stress in our bodies, whatever might be going on, eventually it's going to turn into anger. Here's some other verses to kind of consider. The Bible says, be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your own hearts on your bed, and be silent. So it tells us it's allowing us to be angry. It's just saying be angry and do not sin. Here's also a verse about anger and sin in Ephesians. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger and give no opportunity to the devil. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up and fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. Ephesians 4:26 and 29. So let no corrupting talk come out of your mouth. If you remember, when we are in our emotional part of the brain, the corrupting talk will come out. So what we need to do is calm our nervous system down by doing things like taking deep breaths, by visualizing, by praying, whatever you need to do to calm your nervous system down, so then you are not as triggered, that you are not in reactive mode. Here's a good one. A lot of times we were taught, do not let the sun go down on your anger, and you kind of have to solve all the issues before you go to bed, which I feel like that verse is taken a little bit out of context, and it's not literal. It just means you need to solve problems, not shove them under the rug. But there's a really good verse here that backs up what I say. The beginning of strife is like letting out water. So quit before the quarrel breaks out. So what it tells us is you need to quit or walk away or leave the conflict before it gets escalated. That doesn't mean not to have conflict. When we are in our emotional part of the brain and we're having conflict with our spouse or with our children, we start saying things we don't mean. It is very wise to put it on hold until you calm down, you're not emotionally flooded anymore, your thinking brain turns back on, then come back to the conflict, whatever it might be. If you keep having conflict and you constantly keep getting triggered and emotional about whatever you're talking about, then there might be some other communication issues, or one of you is interrupting the other person's not being able to doesn't feel heard, like their spouse is hearing them or seeing their perspective, then there's other problems. But the Bible tells us that if we see that there's a situation getting escalated, we need to quit and walk away before it breaks into a big argument. So before we close, what do we do when we feel emotionally flooded in a conflict? Let's say with our spouse. Because that if we don't resolve, if we stay in the emotional situation with our spouse, it gets escalated and we say hurtful things which lead to sin, right? So what do? So we need to recognize that you will say hurtful things if you continue in the conflict and in the frustrating situation. Why? Because your thinking brain shuts off when you experience negative emotions. If you don't feel heard, if you don't feel understood, if whatever is going on is super triggering for you, you have to calm down before you have that conversation with your spouse, because you will say hurtful things. You will say disrespectful things. So if you want to avoid hurtful things said in your relationship, you have to calm down and then come back to it later at a different time. Just pick a time and say, we'll talk about this tomorrow. I'm too frustrated. I'm too overwhelmed. I'm too angry to talk about it right now. And then communicating need for some space to calm down. Like, there's nothing wrong with communicating the fact that you're flooded and that you can't think clearly. I will tell my spouse, I need some space to calm down. I'm angry, and if I continue to talk, I'll say something hurtful. I need an hour to calm down and process what I think, or a day, or whatever it might be. And then we can talk about this tomorrow. Or, in an hour or two. I need some time to figure out what I think. Because oftentimes, whatever we're thinking in that heat of the moment is not what we'll be thinking 2 hours later after we kind of let the emotions cool off. So it's actually very wise to wait a little bit to resolve a conflict versus trying to do it in the heat of the moment. What I want you to take away from today's episode, things to kind of keep in mind. When we experience strong negative emotions, this is kind of the takeaways to before you leave. Our logical thinking brain shuts off. We cannot make positive choices. So that's why it's important to regulate and to walk away if you're super agitated. To avoid sinful actions in the moment, the best thing to do is to take a break, walk away, and communicate it. Don't just walk away from your family without saying anything. You can say, I need some space because I'm feeling really frustrated right now, and I don't want to say anything hurtful. During the break, there's things that you can do to calm your nervous system down so you are de-escalated and you're able to re-enter the circumstances, the situation in a much calmer state. And that would be praying, deep breathing, visualizing, saying positive affirmations to help your brain feel safe. You can sing a song, listen to music. There's other things, but this is kind of like the basics that I'm teaching you. Pick one. May it be praying for you. Maybe it's taking deep breaths. For me, it's breathing and visualizing. Super powerful. And saying affirmations, does it come easy? Heck no. Does it take practice? Yes, and yes, and yes, and yes. Is it worth it in the long run? Yes. I am learning to manage my big feelings. I'm also teaching my kids and modeling for them. I'm also protecting the relationships and things that can be said or done when we are super emotional, when we're agitated, when we're emotionally flooded. So that's what I want you to take away from today. And I want you to kind of, before you leave, some action steps for you to take is maybe even journal about this tonight, like something to think about. When I feel stressed, how does that come out in my behavior? How does it affect my relationships? Do I make sinful choices? And next time when you feel very emotional, what is the plan? What are you going to do? What action step are you going to take? Are you going to walk away? Are you going to deep breathe? Are you going to visualize? What are you going to do? I want to I want you to tell me. I want to know who you are, who is listening. So reach out to me. Email me at helloemotionallyhealthylegacy.com. You can reach out to me on Instagram. I want to know who you are, the people that are listening, because I know you're out there. I keep making episodes and I don't know who is actually listening. So I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to meet you. Let me know if this is helpful for you. Tell me what you want to know more about. Come and meet me on Instagram because this is where I'm most active. And I would love to hear from you, moms. And you ladies, have a wonderful day.
I've noticed that a lot of moms have a hard time investing in themselves. They think, oh, I'll just figure this out on my own. I'll get it eventually. I just need to try harder. But has it worked? Has it really, really worked for you? I know that I personally had to go through a season in my life where I had to invest a lot financially to become a better version of myself. I was really struggling. I was in a dark place and I needed somebody to hold my hand and tell me what the next step was. I did not want to be the mom that is angry, that is overwhelmed, that is irritated, that is frustrated, that is snappy at my kids. That's not the kind of mom I wanted my kids to remember. So I ended up going to counseling and investing into myself. I learned so much through that. And now I am so passionate in helping moms to become better versions of themselves. Oftentimes, we just don't know where to start. None of us were really taught how to regulate our own emotions under stress. Most of us have no idea how to do that, and our parents never did it. Nobody taught us. And sometimes we really just need someone to hold our hand and tell us what to do. I'm here for you, Mama. In the show notes, you can sign up for my monthly membership where you get to learn how to become a more patient mom. You get to learn how to regulate your own challenging emotions. We get to do things proactively where we support ourselves so we are more patient to begin with. Also, I offer now one-on-one coaching for moms that really need the one-on-one, who are really, really struggling, who don't want to talk about their problem in a group setting, but they really need that support. They need to figure out why they're stressed out to begin with, how to cut their stress out of their lives, how to manage their stress, how to regulate their own emotions in a way that works for them. I just want to let you know I got you, Mama. So check out in the show notes. You can email me directly for the membership, or you can email me directly at helloemotionallyhealthylegacy.com.